You are not who you think you are. Not entirely. Not completely. Not in the clean, flattering, internally consistent way the story you tell about yourself requires. There is another version of you operating beneath the surface of that story. One that is driven by impulses you have never fully examined, motivated by needs you have never fully admitted, and capable of behaviors you have conveniently filed away under circumstances, stress, or the actions of someone else. This is not an attack. This is not cynicism dressed up as insight. This is the most generous thing anyone can offer you, the truth about the parts of human nature that polite conversation has agreed, by silent consensus, to leave permanently undisturbed. Because here is what that silence costs you: the inability to change what you refuse to see, the exhausting performance of a self-image that requires constant maintenance, and the quiet, persistent gap between who you genuinely are and who you are endlessly claiming to become. The dark truth about human behavior is not that people are evil. It is that people are unexamined, and unexamined darkness does not disappear. It simply finds other ways to express itself. Section 1. The selfishness beneath generosity. Consider the last genuinely kind thing you did for someone. Hold it in your mind, the gesture, the sacrifice, the moment of apparent selflessness. Now sit with an uncomfortable question. Were you entirely without personal motivation? Behavioral psychologist Robert Cialdini spent decades studying human altruism, and what he found dismantled one of the most cherished narratives in the human self-concept. Genuine, purely selfless behavior is extraordinarily rare. Almost every act of generosity carries within it a secondary payload of self-interest, the relief of guilt, the elevation of self-image, the social currency of being perceived as generous, the neurological reward of feeling morally superior. This does not make kindness fraudulent. It does not make generosity worthless. But it makes the claim of pure selflessness one of the most sophisticated illusions the ego constructs, and one of the most resistant to honest examination. Precisely because the stakes of admitting it feel so high. The person who can look at their own generosity and acknowledge the self-serving current running beneath it has not become cynical. They have become honest. And honesty, applied inward with the same rigor we reserve for examining others, is the rarest form of courage available to a human being. Section 2. The tribal cruelty instinct. There is a deeply uncomfortable paradox embedded in the very mechanism that makes human beings capable of profound love and loyalty. The same neurological system that bonds us fiercely to our group, our family, our community, our ideological tribe, simultaneously generates something far darker toward those outside it. Psychologists call this in-group favoritism and out-group derogation, the instinctive elevation of those who are like us, and the equally instinctive diminishment of those who are not. This is not a flaw exclusive to cruel people or extreme ideologies. It operates in ordinary, decent, self-identified, compassionate human beings, in hiring decisions, in judicial judgments, in the quiet comfort we feel when someone outside our group fails, and the equally quiet discomfort we feel when they succeed. Henry Tajfel's landmark social identity experiments demonstrated this with devastating clarity. People required nothing more than arbitrary group assignment to begin favoring their own group and penalizing the other. No history, no conflict, no legitimate grievance, simply the knowledge that a boundary existed and the immediate, automatic human response to honor it. The darkness here is not that tribalism exists. It is that it operates so seamlessly, so automatically, and so far beneath conscious moral reasoning that most people never notice themselves doing it. Section 3. The comfort of ignorance. The human brain was not designed to seek truth. It was designed to seek survival. And for most of evolutionary history, psychological comfort and social belonging were more critical to survival than factual accuracy. Which means the brain you are using right now to evaluate this information has a deeply embedded, neurologically reinforced preference for the version of reality that disturbs it least. Leon Festinger demonstrated this through his foundational work on cognitive dissonance. When confronted with evidence that contradicts a deeply held belief, the brain does not update the belief. It attacks the evidence. It discredits the source. It constructs elaborate alternative explanations. It does anything and everything required to preserve the existing worldview. Because the existing worldview, however inaccurate, is the architecture the identity is built upon. And demolishing architecture, even for the purpose of building something better, feels indistinguishable from destruction. This is why people stay in situations they know are harmful. Why they maintain beliefs the evidence no longer supports. Why they surround themselves exclusively with voices that confirm what they already think. Not because they are weak. Not because they are stupid. Because the brain they were given prioritizes comfort over truth, and no one told them they had the option to override it. You have now stood at the edge of the mirror. You have seen the selfishness threaded through generosity, the cruelty embedded within belonging, the elaborate neurological preference for comfortable illusion over inconvenient truth. And perhaps, if you engaged with part one with genuine honesty, rather than the comfortable distance of applying it exclusively to other people, something shifted slightly in your chest. A quiet recognition, a flicker of uncomfortable familiarity, the subtle, unsettling sensation of being seen in a place you did not fully realize was visible. Good. That discomfort is not a warning to retreat. It is a signal that something real has been touched, and real is the only material from which genuine transformation has ever been constructed. Because here is what separates the people who consume dark truths as entertainment from the people who are actually changed by them. The willingness to make it personal, not abstract, not theoretical, not safely located in the behavior of politicians, strangers, or people who have wronged you, but uncomfortably, courageously, specifically personal. Section 4. The Envy Engine. Nobody admits to envy. It is the most socially unacceptable of all human emotions, more shameful than anger, more concealed than fear, more universally experienced, and more universally denied than perhaps any other feeling in the entire spectrum of human psychology. And that denial is precisely what makes it so dangerous, because envy that is unacknowledged does not dissolve, it transforms. It becomes the cutting remark disguised as honest feedback, the subtle undermining of someone's achievement framed as realistic perspective, the quiet satisfaction at another person's failure that arrives before the compassion does, and lingers longer than you would ever admit. Psychologist Richard Smith's research on envy reveals something both humbling and remarkably useful. The people and achievements that trigger our envy are not random. They are precise. They point directly at the desires we have not yet honored, the potential we have not yet pursued, the life we secretly believe we are capable of but have not yet had the courage to claim. Envy is not evidence of smallness. It is a diagnostic instrument, one that reveals, with uncomfortable accuracy, exactly where your unlived life is pressing against the boundaries of the one you are currently living. The question is never, why do I feel this? The question is, what is this feeling trying to show me about what I actually want? Transform the mirror of envy from a source of shame into a compass. And suddenly, the most uncomfortable emotion you carry becomes the most honest direction you have ever been given. Section 5. The Conformity Surrender. In 1951, Solomon Asch conducted one of the most quietly devastating experiments in the history of social psychology. He placed participants in a room with actors, all of whom confidently gave the same obviously incorrect answer to a simple visual judgment task. And the result was not that people laughed at the absurdity, trusted their own perception, and answered correctly. The result was that a staggering majority abandoned what their own eyes clearly told them and conformed to the group, not because they were coerced, not because the stakes were high, but because the psychological pain of social isolation, of being the one voice that diverges from the collective, registered in the brain with the same neurological signature as physical pain. Belonging is not merely a preference. It is a survival mechanism so deeply encoded that it will override personal conviction, observable reality, and genuine moral judgment, quietly, automatically, and without conscious permission. This is how ordinary people participate in extraordinary cruelty, not through malice, through the desperate, primal, profoundly human need to remain inside the warmth of the group. The antidote is not the arrogant rejection of all social influence. It is the deliberate, daily cultivation of an internal reference point, a set of values so clearly defined, so honestly examined, and so personally owned that the gravitational pull of collective opinion finds something solid to pull against. Know what you actually believe, not what you have been rewarded for believing, not what your group requires you to believe. What you, stripped of audience, stripped of consequence, stripped of the need for approval, actually, genuinely believe. That clarity is not stubbornness. It is the only real protection against the surrender that disguises itself as belonging. Section 6. The avoidance architecture. Here is perhaps the darkest truth of all, and the one that operates most invisibly in the lives of the most capable, most intelligent, most outwardly functional human beings. The life you are not living is being maintained, brick by the elaborate system you have constructed to avoid examining why you are not living it. Busyness that is never quite productive enough to produce the life you want, but always busy enough to justify not questioning why. Relationships that consume energy without generating growth, but familiar enough to feel safer than the unknown alternative. Ambitions perpetually deferred to a future version of yourself who will somehow be more ready, more resourceful, more deserving than the one alive right now. This is avoidance architecture, the sophisticated, self-reinforcing system of distractions, justifications, and carefully maintained half-lives that protect you from the one confrontation that would change everything. The confrontation with your own deepest fear, not the fears you discuss freely, those have already been domesticated by repetition, but the ones beneath those. The fear that you are not capable of the life you most want, that you are fundamentally undeserving of it, that trying fully and failing would be more devastating than never having tried at all. These fears are not the truth about you, but they have been treated as though they are, and they have been building your ceiling ever since. The architecture must be examined, not demolished violently, but walked through consciously, room by room, fear by fear, with the quiet, unshakable understanding that what has been built by avoidance can be rebuilt by courage. The darkness in human behavior is not located somewhere out there, in other people, in broken systems, in the failures of society. It is located, with precise and equal distribution, within every human being who has ever drawn breath on this planet, including you, including the person delivering these words. And that is not a condemning truth. It is a liberating one, because what lives within you is within your reach. What operates inside you can be examined by you. What has been unconsciously driving your behavior can be consciously redirected by the same mind that, once it decides to stop protecting itself from discomfort, is capable of extraordinary transformation. The envy that has been quietly steering your resentment can become the compass that finally points you toward your unlived potential. The conformity that has been silencing your genuine convictions can become the contrast that clarifies exactly who you are when no one is watching. The avoidance that has been constructing your ceiling can become the moment you walk toward rather than away from it, the doorway to the only version of your life worth actually living. Darkness examined is not darkness surrendered to. It is darkness metabolized, transformed, through the extraordinary alchemy of honest self-awareness, into the most powerful fuel for human growth ever discovered. You do not become your best self by perfecting your light. You become it by having the courage to examine your shadow and refusing to let what you find there be the final word on who you are capable of becoming. And so, with everything this video has placed in front of you, we leave you with the one question that cuts beneath all the others. Of all the uncomfortable truths explored in this video, the hidden selfishness, the tribal instinct, the conformity, the envy, the elaborate architecture of avoidance, which one did you feel the strongest impulse to immediately dismiss, deflect, or mentally apply to someone other than yourself? Because that impulse, that specific, immediate, almost reflexive resistance, is not a coincidence. It is a door. And on the other side of it lives the version of you that stops managing the darkness from a careful distance, and finally has the courage to walk through it. That version of you has been waiting long enough.